In today's episode of Gardening 101, we started off by visiting the Walter Sisulu National Botanical Garden to find out more about conservation when it comes to our indigenous plants. Now, as Linda Galvad shows us, composting is a crucial part of having healthy plants, and making your own compost can be done on a small or large scale.
We're at the gorgeous Saxon Hotel Villas and Spa at their compost pile, which I have to tell you is our only source of good soil when we use it for the organic rooftop garden they have here. Now, the most important thing when growing, irrespective of anything else, is your soil. And compost, organic composting, is key and king. What we're going to talk about today is the importance of compost. Firstly, it holds 10 times its weight in moisture, which is imperative in a water-constrained environment. It builds your soil, it feeds your plants with all the macro and micronutrients they need, and it saves money because you recycle. This is my absolute favorite. What I've done here is I've built you a little mini compost pile to show you how it works. As you can see, there are clear layers of what we call greens and browns. We've started off with a 20 centimeter layer of twigs so that the oxygen can come in from the bottom, because composting needs exactly what plants need: water, sunlight, and air. We've started off with a 20 centimeter layer of twigs, and then we've put a 20 centimeter layer of what we call greens. Greens are things that are virtually still alive, like freshly cut grass or flowers that are just dying, vegetable scraps, coffee grinds, eggshells, things like that. You put a 20 centimeter layer of greens which have to lie on top of the browns. Then you put your 20 centimeter layer of browns. Browns are things like newspaper, dead leaves, anything from the garden that's been lying around that you've cut off some twigs. Remember not to use very thick twigs because they take longer to break down. So then we put a layer of greens again on top of the browns, because it's the greens that work on the browns to degrade. And so you continue until you've reached a 1.5 meter height. The benefit of doing small compost heaps is that you only need a minimum of 2 square meters and 1.5 meters high. And when you live in a small townhouse, or if you only have a small piece of ground, this is ideal. You can still compost. There's no reason why you can't. Once you've reached your maximum height, you then cover it and you wait. Now let's talk about the how-to. Once you know that you've layered these things correctly, which you can basically do in a day, obviously you can keep your things aside, like your greens and your browns, as you get them, keep them separate, and then go into making yourself a compost pile. It just takes a few hours. What you do is you continue to layer the pile as I've mentioned, and you cover it and leave it for 10 days undisturbed. 10 days time, you uncover it, you check the moisture. If it needs some water, just a little bit of water. You don't want your pile soaking wet, definitely not. Remember that when the greens degrade, it's going to already make a lot of moisture. So you probably won't need to add much water at all, if any. You then mix the whole thing up after you've layered it so beautifully. You mix it up so that you can get everything from the outside into the middle so it can start to heat up and decompose. You then cover your compost pile again and leave it for another 7 days. After 7 days' time, you do the very same thing. You mix the compost up, you let all the things that are outside get inside, heat up and decompose. You do that another twice. Once that's done, you just leave it to degrade. In summer, it should take about 4 months, and then you'll have your black gold. The thing is, you need to be mindful of where you put your compost pile. It's a good idea to put it in direct sunlight so that it can speed up the decomposition process by adding extra warmth. If you don't have direct sunlight, then dappled light is a great idea, and that's also good enough. You need to remember that obviously if it's a really big pile, you don't have to cover it because there's so much going on there and so much decomposition happening that it will create its own warmth. It will really be big enough. Now what we have in front here is 2 piles of, one is sifted compost and the other is partially degraded compost. Now this is just absolutely gorgeous. What you do with your sifted compost, if you want to sift your compost once it's ready, you can put it onto your organic vegetable garden, put it everywhere, in and amongst your plants. You never have to worry about having anything burning your plants because it's completely degraded. And as you know, we never use chemicals, so there's no possibility of your plants being burnt, and you can also always add as much compost as you want when you want. The partially degraded compost over there, the value of that is that you can use it as a mulch. And mulch is extremely important for retaining moisture in the soil, protecting the roots, and keeping the weeds at bay. The good thing about using partially degraded compost as a mulch is that it will eventually degrade and add extra nutrition into the soil. How do you check when your compost is ready? Well, the ideal temperature to reach is 55 degrees. And the reason why you should reach that temperature is so that you can make sure that all your weed seeds and pathogens are killed. So using a thermometer, a long prong thermometer, so that you can stick it right into the middle of the compost pile and check the heat. You don't want it to go higher than 55 degrees, and if it does happen, you can just add some cold water to bring the temperature down. There's some great additions that you can add to your compost pile to speed up the decomposition process, as well as to get the extra nutrients that you can use in your garden. And what we use are these great weeds. So we've got some dandelion leaves over here, we've got some stinging nettle over here, and we've got some comfrey over here. And actually, we grow these in our garden so that we can use them to make weed tea. And that's what this big container is doing over here. What we use the wooden stick for is to stir it daily to incorporate oxygen into the mix and get the decomposition process going faster. So I'm just going to throw these in here. We're going to fill this up with water right to the top. Remember to stir it every single day, and in about 4 to 6 weeks, you'll have the best weed tea you can find. What you do is you just take the mixture and pour it on your compost pile. Especially when you've got a really big compost pile, then a big bin like this really goes a long way, and that's great. Once your water is all finished, you can then take the sludge that's left in at the bottom and you can add that onto your compost pile too. You can even use those leaves fresh, because those are decomposers that speed up the decomposition process of your compost pile. Or you can use some of the water, fill it in a little bottle and use it as a foliar feed to spritz on your house plants, or even in your vegetable garden when your vegetables need a little bit of a pick-me-up. When you've got a huge compost pile like this, you must remember that you won't be able to have everything like your greens and browns on hand all the time. So what we do is we also layer. As you can see, we've got our browns and our greens, but as and when we get the produce in, so we do the layering. Sometimes we've got more browns than greens. We keep those in abeyance until we have enough greens on the top as a layer, and then we add our browns. Remember, there is nothing better than having your own organic compost to use in your vegetable gardens. Remember, no chemicals here, and your plants will be really happy and successful for it. You still need to turn your compost pile even though it's really big. So we turn this compost pile 3 times a month, and we follow the exact same process as we do with the smaller compost pile that we showed you earlier.
After the break, Mike Rickhoff is back to add more detail to his 2 garden designs.